So welcome everybody to our last session of the Rural Communities webinar series this month in October. The name of this session is Don't Push Me, I'm Close to the Edge, How Not to Lose Your Mind During a Pandemic, an Election, Social Unrest, and Life. This series is sponsored by the Rural Policy Student Advocacy Group here at Mississippi Valley State University. And the project focuses specifically on promoting citizen-centered democracy as well as addressing challenges specifically in the Mississippi Delta community. For those of you who are students at Mississippi Valley State University, please take a look at the link and apply to join. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Brian Turner. He blends experiences, lessons, and a number of things in his life to motivate, educate, and activate. He's a native of New Orleans and a graduate of the Southern University at Baton Rouge. He completed his doctoral studies in clinical psychology at Jackson State University. He is a licensed clinical psychologist in private practice at Moments of Truth, LLC. He's also a tenured associate professor in the Department of Psychology at Xavier University of Louisiana, and he serves as the director of the African American Diaspora Studies program at Xavier University of Louisiana. So here are some more important aspects of Dr. Turner's bio, but I think the most important is the last bullet. Dr. Turner is the proud single father of a beautiful girl, Blair, and Von Duke, a full-blooded German Rottweiler. This session is to bring awareness to mental health strategies, especially for residents in rural communities. You might not be aware that rural communities, they have a issue with access to services. So I'm really excited about Dr. Turner joining us today. If you have questions, please include them in the Q&A section or in the chat. And it's all yours, Dr. Turner.
All right, thank you. Let me get myself here with my share screen. I would like to thank you for that introduction. I would like to definitely let everyone know it is a pleasure to be in this forum. I have not had to dress up in a while, so it's very nice. I did get dressed. I have on actual pants and shoes. So I'm not just sitting here chilling. I would like to once again thank everybody who has made it into this forum on this evening. I will be trying to look at the chat as I go through here, but as questions come, I'll try to ask them as well. If you have them, I will stop and answer them. We can talk. I think this should be fairly informal, but informative. So what I would like to do is make sure I'm actually delivering something that you can take home with you. So I'll start. Definitely thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate those kind words. As my mentor once said, I have to be mindful when people start reading really long bios about you, that means you better be good. All right. So let's get started for today. What I first would like to ask, when you look at these pictures, here's the thing. Everybody out there, get your pen and paper because you may not be able to respond to me, but as I ask questions, you can jot down notes and things that you want to think about as we go that you might, be useful for you later. Because I'm not going to be able to answer everybody's questions, and we are time limited. I could do this all night long. This is therapeutic for me to do it, and I hope it's therapeutic for you to have this, but I could do this all night long. But I want to start with, what do you feel when you see these images? I see a gentleman in this top left corner. He's online. His computer could have crashed. He might have just been on social media and found that his partner is cheating, and he's disturbed. He could be laughing at a joke. He could be laughing at stuff that's going on in the world. He could be very highly agitated. On the top right, this image hits hard for me in New Orleans because this is a scene outside of the Charbonnet-Labat funeral home in New Orleans in the Tremé area. And even though it's the picture of a funeral, here in New Orleans, we celebrate the life of those who transition. So you'll see the Mardi Gras Indians masked, and you'll see people out dancing and second lining. So it's a mix of the potential sadness and grief, but it's also showing joy and happiness for the potential transition and the life that was lived. When I look on the bottom left, I see a woman in a wheelchair with both of her legs in casts, and the thought about Medicaid and healthcare and what could be happening for her. And is she sad about what happened to her to put in this situation, or is she sad about the potential bills that are coming? She could also be happy. Maybe she had to have this surgery because she'd been in pain, and now she's finally getting some type of resolution. And on the bottom right, I think these images, when I come to this final one, I think a lot about what we've been going through the last couple of months. Think about what some of us have endured for our lives, but this last one, many times I think about students who come to college and they're told to chase the dreams, and this person has a briefcase in one hand, but the money he's chasing, right? And so here we are, we're looking at this gentleman who's really taking time to try to figure out what he should be doing with his life. And I'm saying him, but it could be a woman, right? We know right now women are the most educated people in our society, which I think is great. That means we're taking the tops off of some of the limitations that we've had on women for far too long. So I start there, but I think there's just 4 things I'm going to do tonight. One, I'm not going to do a lot of statistics because I want this to be stuff people can take home. And I remember when I would sit in things like this and people would just spew statistics at me and numbers. I wouldn't remember that. But I remember their words. I remember what they told me I could do. I remember what they gave me that I could actually work with. So the first thing we have to do is really define what is stress. I think a lot of people have these kind of personal definitions of stress, but I want to give a good sound definition of stress so that we can actually parse out what we should do. Next, I want to talk about how we should respond to stress. Not just how we should respond, but how do we respond to stress? And then the work that we're going to do, the 2 things, because I'm a clinician, so I never leave people without ways to make life better. So we're going to talk about how do you cope, what ways you cope, how to make coping better, and then we're going to talk about daily life stress reduction tips. Now, I'm going to play with y'all about this title because the title is very long for one reason. We never know what we're going to get hit with. So the whole point of it is really just how not to lose your mind when anything hits you, when anything comes. I don't care what it is. I want to try to make sure that I give you some tools that no matter what comes down the pipe, you're ready to handle it and you have the tools to do that. So let's get ready. Let's take this journey. So here's a couple operational definitions. So I said I was going to give numbers, but I'm still a researcher and a scientist. So I got to do this, right? So the first thing I want you to know, you're going to hear me talk about tonight, appraisal. Appraisal is just like what you hear when we talk about a house or a car. We are, in essence, trying to assess or evaluate what it is that are causing demands on ourselves, on our bodies. And when we talk about this, what we're looking at is the fact that oftentimes we're in a situation where we're trying to figure out, do I have the resources necessary to deal with what's coming? I'm going to give you all an example about appraisal later, but let me do these definitions. Coping style. Now, coping style is very simple. It's whatever strategy, whatever you do to deal with stressful situations. As it says here, there's 2 dominant styles that are authors that I pulled from this. And actually, this is a part of my dissertation. So I think I'm pretty well versed in this because I've been talking about this for almost 15 years at this point, right? But there's 2 dominant styles of coping we're going to define: problem-focused and avoidant-focused. But remember, a coping style is simply the way that you look to reduce stress. So when you hear me say problem-focused coping, that's a coping style where a person actually looks to engage the environment. I'm going to go out, I'm going to do something to change the environment. An example would be if you're at work and you're not being put on the teams that are getting ahead, or you're not getting the promotions. A problem-focused coping style might be walking into your manager's office and saying, hey, Mr. So-and-so, I see that I'm not being offered these opportunities. I would really like those opportunities. Can I get them? All right. That's very focused on the environment. You're going out to the individual and saying, hey, I want to change something. The second, avoidant-focused coping style, this is where a person works to change something within themselves, or they change how they think about it. They change their reaction to it. Same example about not being placed on teams that are getting ahead at work. This person who uses an avoidant-focused coping style, what they might decide to do is what? I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to show them that they're not giving what I want, so I'm going to get my own team, and I'm going to work hard. I'm going to show them that they're missing out by putting me on that team, right? The next point, stress. And if you look here, I have stress and stressors because they're actually two different things. And there's a reason why. Stress is any condition that causes you to look at what are your demands, right? What is it that's actually demanding you? And stress is something that can carry on for some time. So stress is something that, March, we got hit with a pandemic. We've all been stressed. We've all been reacting to it, right? But that stress has been bad for some people. It may not be too bad for others. When I think about stress, the idea is that some stress can be bad, some stress can be good. So as I list here, sometimes stress is not bad. The stress of love, being in a relationship. I know some of y'all may be in relationships where it's the bad stress, but some of us strive for a relationship where it's the good stress, where you love coming home, you love playing those games, you love going on dates. It's the promotion at work where you've been working hard and finally get that promotion. That's some good stress. I put down there some stress for November 4th. There's some potential stress that we may feel depending upon where we're going. Now, stressors is different because a stressor is simply an event or a circumstance that a person may deem threatening or harmful. And usually there's just one occurrence. So sometimes a stressor may be a car accident. Now, hopefully you don't get into car accidents every day, but if you get into a car accident like somebody I know recently, that was just stressful one day. Reason why I say a stressor is different from stress, because if you have insurance, if you have good quality insurance, they take care of you, you get your car back and you keep on moving. Whereas stress would be if your car didn't get fixed, if you're not able to drive, if you can't do the things you want to do, that continues on and on. So keep that in mind as we go forward. Sometimes we just have to be in a good state. And I want you to take this down, write this down right now. We're going to be dealing with the ABCs, dealing with how not to lose your mind. I've already given you. You're going to find out how to love ourselves, how to love the people around. It's going to know ABCs, praise, behavior, and hope. All right? So, somebody for me, you know what? I'm an extrovert. I miss this because I usually have, like, since I'm from New Orleans, I bring coconuts or beads, other little things that people love from New Orleans, like pralines. What I want you to do, somebody type into the chat, what should you do if you're on a plane and your oxygen mask deployed? What did the flight attendants tell you to do first? Dr. Hawkins, you can't do this. Okay, Drew, good job. Yes. Now, Drew, here's your $64,000 question. Why do they tell you put your mask on first? This is for Drew only. Let's see if Drew can bring us home. Uh-oh. Drew, you need some help? All right. Woo! Good job, Drew. All right. I don't know you, Drew, but when I see you, whatever I can do to help you, I got you. Whatever it is, I'll bring you something. I'll get your address or something. So I'm sure you know how to reach Dr. Hawkins or me. I'll send you something because you got both of those. Drew just nailed it. And this is the point about why you have to take care of yourself. So many of us in our communities, in our lives, are so busy taking care of everyone else that when we start to suffer, when we start to struggle, we can't take care of ourselves. It's gotten too far, too bad, whether it be physical health, mental health, financial health. I'm here tonight to tell you, take care of yourself first. Put your mask on first, then help others. Drew, thank you for getting us through that. All right. Here's where we're going to start. Now, I'm going to tell you now, I'm giving you the basic model of stress that was provided. If you look on there, that says 1984, a long time ago. I'm going to modernize that. But this is the basic idea of what stress happens. You have an event, as I told you have a stressor, right? You go into your appraisal phase. Within that appraisal phase, you decide if the event is threatening or if it's not. Obviously, if it's not threatening, no stress, you got it. But if you perceive it to be threatening, here's what happens. Here's my example for you all. Light bill is due. Then some financial troubles. Light bill is $100. You have $200. What do? You pay the bill. You have $100 left over. You can still eat. And guess what? This week is payday. So you're good. No stress, right? It says your perception of the ability to cope with the threat, positive stress. You can take care of it. But what happens, that light bill comes, it's $100. You only have $50. Now you begin to experience negative stress. With that negative stress, now you have to go into your bag of tricks. What have you done? What do I do? How do I make this happen? Payday is a couple weeks off. Do you borrow the money from somebody? Do you send them the $50 and now you have nothing and you still owe them 50? I had some students one day tell me, Dr. Turner, I'm just going to give me some candles and that's going to be it. I was like, that's funny. But you got a couple of days. It's getting cold. What are you going to do? That's the negative stress that most of us get caught with. That's the stress that we carry for that next couple of weeks. And of course, if you're a student, if you're taking care of a family, if other people, as I said earlier, dependent upon you, now you start to feel it in here physically. You feel it in your jaw, in your neck, in your back. Now you have to really figure out what to do. We're going to talk about how we modernize that model. So let's talk about the appraisal process first. The appraisal process, as we list here, is really about observation and assessment. The ideal is that you should sit back and take a look. And I don't mean sit back like just go home and sit. I'm just saying, kind of the figurative speech. But you want to sit back and evaluate what actually is stressing you and what actually is the problem. In the midst of the world we're living in right now, many of us are so busy, so engaged in so many things that we don't always have the time to do this step. This step alone might be the number one factor that could actually change how you stress, i.e. how you cope. As it says, you engage the situation, you make a summation of what resources are required to endure this stressful event. Once you determine which resources are needed, what outcomes are possible, and possible coping styles will then be initiated. So what you begin to look at is once you give this appraisal, you now can determine, will I take step A or will I take step B? That becomes vitally important because when you make this commitment to a certain coping style, it's very hard to go back. Not because you don't want to, but because you've already begun to utilize the resources. So think about what you've been going through the last few months or over your years. How many times have you made the wrong appraisal? How many times have you not taken stock of the resources you really need, and thereby you find yourself further and further involved in a situation that's stressful, it's debilitating, it's taken away from you, it's draining you. So that's why this appraisal is so important. The behavior. As I said, the behavioral process begins the action. Now, the second phase, the behavior, is what we say we streamline your situation. You've now begun to implement the strategy you're using. So now you start to focus on the context. Am I getting the results I want? Are things changing like I need to? I've made this decision to take on this extra financial obligation. I've taken in my nieces and nephews. I've taken in someone else's kid. I've taken on another job. See, that's actually when I tell people, don't take on an extra job if it's going to give you more stress. You have to curb your actual spending, and that might help you better. And you still have time to be with your family. You still have time to do the things you want to do. Because if you curb your spending for a shorter amount of time, you'll find that you may be better in the long run than taking on another job where you spend money to get to work, you don't sleep as well, you don't eat as well, you start having physical, all kind of stuff like that, right? But here's the thing in the second phase. As you're taking action, you have to think about how available are my resources? Can I maintain this coping style? So we've specified the resources you need. You've made the determination how you're trying to cope. But this last point here says historical relevance of past coping styles may be used. What that means is, and this is where some of us have gotten good at this. Sometimes we get into situations when we realize, oh, I don't need to be here. This is a bad situation. I've been here before. So we can quickly shift, or we realize, oh, I know how to fix this. How many of us, Dr. Turner now has a few dollars, so if my truck breaks, I have a good mechanic. But there was a time in my younger day where I didn't. I had to learn how to fix my own cars. So I knew if something went wrong in my little truck, I had to figure it out. And so I felt good at those times where I could say, oh, I know what's going on. Let me just go over to AutoZone and get what I need, and I can fix this. But there were times where the repair job was a little bit more than I could, and I left one of my trucks on the side of the road in Geismar, Louisiana, because I didn't have the money to fix it. And it took me a while before I could go get it. And that's what happens in those situations. Sometimes when we're good, this coping style works because we know it works and it's good. And that's something we rely on. And sometimes we rely on it too much because now we become creatures of habit. Remember that. We're going to talk about that later. Now the coping process, the last phase. You've started the coping process. It's been going. You're trying it. This is where you get to decide if it works or not. You actually have begun to change your behavior. You've shifted your behavior, how you think, how you cope. You've thought about how do you change your interaction interpersonally with yourself, with your family, with your friends. You look at how you change the environment. How do you change your interaction with other people? How do you think differently about things? This stage is really about your ability at this point to assess and evaluate, have you found success? Have you had the outcomes that you want? Now, this becomes important because the question here is, what happens if you're still stressing? What happens if the coping style you tried doesn't work? What do you do, Dr. Turner? What do I do, Dr. Turner, if I've tried everything I knew? Well, that's where we're going to talk now. Two things can happen. You can change and decide what I've been doing doesn't work, or you can do the same thing. Now, obviously, I don't want you to do the same thing, so I'm going to talk about the shift that you need to make. So the first one is a directional shift. This is where you appraise the event, you decide that you need to make a change, so now you try to problem-focused way. Now, how do you do or implement a problem-focused and environmental way of coping? This is where you look at the environment. You determine what actually about the environment is that you can change. Let me give some examples in a second. But the second shift is the emotion. Remember, I talked about this in my definitions. This is where you might try to make this shift about yourself. So environment-focused shifts in terms of coping, this is where I want you to think about how you have to think about putting yourself in better positions to be successful. I've seen people do things like go to meal prepping. I've seen people shift their sleep schedules. I've worked with people in therapy to help them understand better about what they want out of their work relationships. The issue that I want you to think about in terms of a problem-focused shift, you have to be able to actually change the environment. Why institute a coping style to change the environment when you can't change the environment? What you can think about in that problem-focused situation as well is, if I can't change the whole environment, I can change how I operate in that environment. And that's one of the things about the problem focus. And once again, you have to be able to actually change the environment. Don't want you to think that you should take a problem-focused environmental coping style into a situation you don't have that power. It's only going to further stress you. The avoidant, i.e. emotion-focused, talks about when a person realizes that maybe it's about them. I think a lot about this coping style when we've had our own experiences personally where we've not been successful in things. Where we have to think about the way we look at it, the way we engage, the way we think about ourselves. I think about things like self-esteem. I think about things like confidence. A term I love to talk about is locus of control. It's the belief that you actually have the ability to change what's going on in your life. Or you may think that it's other people. So when you think about this avoidant, i.e. emotion-focused coping style, this is where I want you to think about the situations where sometimes you got to believe in yourself. You got to trust in yourself. One of the biggest things I work with clients around is actually just learning how to trust themselves again. Some of us have gotten into situations where we're so used to making bad decisions, we don't trust that we can make good decisions. Let's talk about this coping style thing. Now y'all ready? Here we go. We're gonna get into this work. I'm gonna take my shirt off so we can work. Let's do some real work. All right. I'm sorry also if my dog is barking. It's time for him to eat, but I had to put him out because otherwise he would have run over here and wanted to take over the presentation, right? So let's see. What Folkman and Lazarus talked about at this point is that we're constantly reappraising what we should do. We're constantly looking at what outcomes do we want. See, this is the point where I want to engage everybody to delve back into the energy that it takes to be successful. Because coping, and the next slide is unique. Each one of us, each person here and everybody that we know copes differently. And the reason why is a number of these things that I list, our parents teach us how to cope. Many of us watched our parents struggle, or we watched them be successful. But our parents taught us how they coped with situations. We saw some of our parents maybe engage in some unhealthy practices. Next, we looked at culture. Culture is a very broad topic that includes things like religion, gender, spiritual beliefs. What else might that include? Music, right? I remember growing up, they would tell us that rap music was the reason why so many people were committing crimes. And I was like, that's a lie. People are committing crimes because they don't have money and they want to eat. Or maybe they just don't have anything else to do and they don't know better. But culture is big. What about resources? We've seen people who seemingly have come from nothing and they rise up to be very great. What about previous experiences? We see people who come from limited resources and they don't have these things, but that experience drives them. They've had experiences with dealing with stress. I was recently told by a friend, I found it a very insightful experience that he reminded me of. He said, BT, that's a name from my past. I'm sorry. He said, Brian, I've never seen you upset or angry. So to hear you talking this way lets me know how serious this was. And then he gave me several situations where he remembered me being angry. And I remembered about it. He said, that's not how you cope with stuff. He said, you're always the cool thinking person. So think about your previous experience. What do you normally do when you're stressed? Is that the way you want to handle it, or should you handle it different? We think about education level. And education level is not just degree. It's about what you've learned, what you've pulled in terms of knowledge. Sometimes we have to be more educational in our responses. And then this last one, levels of distress. It's very important that when you think about how you're dealing with a situation that's stressful, you got to think about, am I actually okay right now, or are there other things pulling on me? What's my past experience when I've been distressed or when I'm stressed and I don't know what I'm going to do? What I'll tell you is this: when you find that there's too many things pulling on you, refrain from making that decision. Step back. Don't make a decision when you're not in your right mind, when you're not feeling good. Liken it to if you're sick and you're taking medication and you want to drive across the country. Just don't do it. You're not in your best space. Wait until you feel better. Wait until you have a clearer mind. All right? Here's an example of what society and what coping has done. Research has found that men and women actually employ the same coping mechanisms, meaning men and women use both avoidant as well as problem-focused coping. However, unfortunately, the research found that women experience greater amount of stress because of societal expectations. So because women feel greater pressure from society when they have to make decisions when they're coping, it distorts the actual coping styles that they use. That's why we actually find that women tend to lean more to what we call emotional coping. They deal more like with relationships and wanting to be close and have friendships and have others, whereas men do more instrumental. We want to fix things. Men want to figure out how do we make it better. And society has caused that in many spaces, because what we know is that men and women are no different in how we cope. But if there's outside pressures, if there's other things pulling on you, society still shows us that far too often women wind up being the caregiver both to children and parents. Well, if men don't have that pressure, men don't have the same situation in terms of how they cope with stress. So we have to think about that, right? That's an example of what happens when outside pressures affect how we cope and how we deal with stress. So here's a couple of thoughts I want to use going into the next phase, because once again, here's where I want you to start thinking, what are you doing? How are you going to change how you cope? How are you going to deal with stress? Focus of coping serves to reconstruct or orient a person differently for future use of coping styles. Think about what has been successful in your past, what has worked well for you. When you've tried to do things, how has it gone? Did you get the outcome you want? And if not, why not? Think about the times you've been successful. Why did you get to have the success you want? When you look at avoidant-based coping styles, I've already alluded to this, you want to be grounded in your mood. You don't want to be overly emotional. You want to think about the cognition, the thoughts that you're having. You want to think about the way that you can actually control your self-gratification, i.e. maybe I'll go to school and get this degree because it'll be better for me and my family later, and I have to tighten up the ship right now. The results can actually be a change in your behavior, or you may acquire a new skill set, new knowledge base. One of the things that we see during this pandemic, which I think is actually somewhat positive, people are having to reinvent themselves in what they do to live every day. I don't like that we had to do during the pandemic, but I've seen a lot of people start businesses and restaurants and craft designing and things like that. And I see so much creativity. And I think about when we get out of this pandemic, there's going to be a lot of people who service us, take care of us, who provide for us in a way that they never thought they could. So that's a part of that shift, is that people begin to engage in things differently because they realize, I got some different skills. I know some different things. I've seen so many people reading books and looking up stuff and figuring out new ways to do things. I've actually employed my brothers in that way. We built so much new stuff at our houses and our homes because we just didn't have much else to do. But we realized we have such skills. So now we rarely buy stuff from the stores in terms of furniture and yard stuff. We just make it ourselves, right? So here's the thought. Nobody wants their coping style to be problematic. All of us work towards stress reduction. The problem is that some of us engage in some of the bad coping styles. Now, I ain't perfect. I'm human. I've had to endure some bad coping styles because sometimes you just have to say, look, I don't know what I'm going to do right now, and I'm going to do something I probably shouldn't do. Now, I'm here to also tell you, don't do it. It don't work. It's not helpful. It's not going to be better. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of some headaches. It's a waste of energy. But think about this. Alcohol, drugs, excessive partying, or impulsive behaviors, like the Amazon boxes that everybody was talking about, right? Think about the online shopping and the impulsive activities of just getting out and doing things. That's actually one of the things I think about why so many people are so ready to get back outside. It's an impulse. It's a reaction to being inside. But I know a lot of people personally who've had to endure COVID-19, or they've had family members who've died because of the impulse need to just be out. That's not the way you want to solve problems. Bad coping, quitting without trying or giving up. I tell this to my students and mentees all the time. I don't know anybody who's failed at life unless they just quit. And I say that because if you're in school and you get a bad grade, you're not there to get all good grades. You're there to get a degree. If you're working a job, you're not there to be the boss unless it's your business. You're there to be a good employee. Now, if you're there to be the boss, you're there to take care of your good employees. Y'all see how I just did that, made that work? Because the reality of it is you can't fail as long as you're still trying. Denial or ignoring a problem, that's one that I really struggle with seeing, but I get it. Sometimes we don't want to acknowledge that we need to make changes. Because if I acknowledge I want to make the change, that means I now have to make the change. I want y'all to think about this. Jot this down for yourself. What other ways do you use to overcome stress that are not healthy? Some of us overeat. Some of us engage in excessive exercising. Some of us binge watch old TV shows at night. Some of us just sit down mindlessly on the internet for hours. Some of us get down on ourselves. I want you to jot those down, because the reality of it is, when you write down the things that you're doing that's not healthy, now we can start a plan to stop doing those things. Every person can and will use both coping styles. So no one person has to just use one. Although we do see that some of us tend to use one coping style more than others. So we become dominant. Now think about that. As I said earlier, humans tend to be creatures of habit. So now this is a part of your plan. I'm helping you build this plan. So I just asked you to jot down your unhealthy ways. So I want you to now think about, what are your creatures? What are your habits? Why is it that you tend to stress or use stress or experience stress the same way? And why do you tend to respond to stress the same way? As you write that down, I want you to start to envision yourself in those moments and in those times and think about it. If my child comes into the room and says something and I get upset and I get angry, am I really upset or angry with my child? Or maybe I'm upset or angry because my child wants something and I can't provide it for them. So maybe I have to find a different way to react to my child and think about how I can actually provide some of these things or provide conduits or different ways to get it. And then think about it. Does it work all the time or do you just use it all the time? I want you to think about that. Does it work all the time or do you just use it all the time? So here's the model to follow for coping. As I said, we're going to modernize that model. So in 84, and then actually a mentor of mine, and I use this for my dissertation, developed what's called the transactional model of coping and stress. The idea is that we have to actually be honest about the personal characteristics of ourselves and the environment, how those things work so that we can actually understand a little bit better about stress. Now, when I pull this up in the next slide, don't be afraid, don't get all crazy. I'm not going to ask you to remember this. It's not a test. It's just, I had to learn it. I'm here to help break it down. If you really like it, holler at me. I'll get it to you. You can use it because it's not mine. It's in the book, all right? But the idea is this. We have to look at the different interactions that occur in our life that can actually elicit a stress response. Because remember, not all stress is bad stress. But the model proposed that each person does rely on a coping style, a particular coping style. However, as it says, each stressful event or stressing situation forces the person to conduct an appraisal. So once again, it's kind of cyclical. Every time you feel stressed, you appraise the situation and figure it out. I want you to look at this model and think about how many situations you might be in that you really need to do this, right? Now, obviously the red is bad. So we know that. Red is bad. The green is good. So I want to start being the green. So I'm going to just take a second and run through this. So right now, the pandemic, that would be a level 1 environmental stressor. These are the high ones, the bad ones, right? Environmental or poverty. Those are the two things that if you get struck by this environmental pandemic that stops you from going, stops you from working, stops you from doing the things you need to do, that is high level. You think about the culture of stress. Now, this is important because each of us has a culture. Black, white, young, old, immigrant, native to American, Native American, wherever it is. You have a racial identity, you have cultural values, you have patterns of living. Then you look at the person variables. What parts of you? I said some things like self-esteem, confidence, self-efficacy, locus of control. What are the things about you? Then we're going to drop these coping strategies. So here it is, internal coping versus external coping. Internal being avoidant, external being environmental. So based upon these things here, you're going to decide which coping style works for you. Now, if you look up here, sources of stress, this arrow takes us there. If you have this type of stress and you got to go all the way over here, then what you find is you're going to have prolonged stress, you're not going to cope well, and you got bad outcomes. But my thought, and what this model says, is if we go through this process, we take you through, we can build you up, you can figure out how to wait, and you'll get effective coping, and you'll have very little to no symptoms of stress. So think about the pandemic, right? You're in rural Mississippi, Louisiana, wherever you might be. If your way of living has been heavily impacted, that's going to cause some stress. But here's the deal. When you think about the person variables, what about you that you can change and shift? Maybe you have to take a different track in how you make a living for a little while. Maybe you have to think about changing some of the things you do. But the thought would be that you can take these steps, you can start to devise a plan, and you can actually see the other side. Now, I used the pandemic there, but I'll use this one in terms of level 3, because this is the lower level. This is kind of the everyday stuff that may happen just in the off occasion, right? Hassles, daily hassles. Daily hassles are actually defined as the little things that happen every day that might tick you off. Think about it. It's the rush hour traffic in the morning. It's the accident that occurred that held you up so you're a little bit late at work. So when you think about your patterns of living, is that something you should get that bent out of shape? Remember I said, maybe sometimes we try to deal with things that are too stressful. So I know for me personally, I just call ahead and say, hey, I'm going to be late. There's an accident. I can't move them. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to sit here and listen to music And when I get there, I get there. Because if I get stressed while I'm sitting here in traffic, I'm sweating, I'm hot. When I get there, I'm all frustrated. The day goes poorly. Think about that part. That's the person variables, and then that's the coping style. That's an external issue. I cannot physically get out there and push the cars out of the way. So I have to focus on my internal, my emotions, calm myself, think about the cognition, problem solve. Well, clearly I have to wait for the police to come because I don't know what's going on. But as of late, y'all notice that people don't get out of the way for the police or ambulances or fire trucks anymore. I don't know when that started to happen, but my thing is, if you don't let them through to get to the accident's going to still be there and we'll still just be sitting here. So I try to get out of the way. Just a little aside, right? But I want you to look at this and think about this. Define your sources of stress. So here's your other take home on your pad. Number one, define the source of stress. If it's something so big like a pandemic, here's your hint. You can't do anything about it. There's nothing Dr. Turner can do, nothing Dr. Hawkins can do. The only persons, and let's be honest about it, that can do something about it is the government. Local, federal, state. Those are issues that we can't get out unless you're very skilled and you can make PPE, unless you have the cure somewhere for you that you're just not sharing, we can't change that. If it's a level 2, major life events are life events. Major life events will be the passing of a loved one or a spouse. Major life events will be loss of a job. Major life events would be a major car accident that stops you from being able to get to work. And then level 3 would be those daily hassles. I said, not you having a car accident, but there's a car accident on the road on the way to work. Maybe the weather's bad and people, especially in New Orleans, I don't know why, but we just don't know how to drive when it rains. So when it rains, I know I got to leave 30 minutes early, right? That's a hassle, but I deal with it. I don't get upset at myself. I just deal with knowing that. Think about your culture. Think about your spiritual living, because I know most of us are persons of faith or believe in something, but I always laugh when I hear people who say they're person of faith, and then when something come along, they lose their faith. I'd be like, can you tap back in to your Lord, your God, whatever it is you believe in? Because that's where you will find some peace. You think about cultural values. I've learned to train myself. I'm more concerned about the person in that accident than I am about me being late to work. So when I think about it that way, I'm calm. I'm sure I haven't had an accident. Racial identity, something that we have to be honest about. Our country is in the midst of social unrest around racial issues and police brutality and issues of funding police and reallocation of funds. And we got Ice Cube going to the White House and not talking to this person. And you got Candace Owens and you got, Steve Harvey here. Well, one of the things that we don't get to talk about tonight because we just don't have enough time is we have to be honest about how race and culture affect a lot of what we do. And the reality is that that's a big part of sometimes what different people experience. Whether you're white and you don't want to be perceived as racist, there's stress with that. You're sensitive to issues around race, but maybe you don't know how to talk about them. So you got to figure that out, right? You got to figure out what not to say. You got to find some people to talk about. If you got that issue, holler at me. I got some tips for that, right? If you're African American, the example right now I feel really bad about, I see the senator from Georgia made fun of the senator from California's name. I feel bad not because I think he really wants to be a bad person. I feel bad because he did something that he probably didn't have to do. He could have easily drawn his differences, made his conclusion without degrading her name, because now there's a groundswell of people who are very upset about that. I'm fortunate. I have a very simple sounding name, Brian Lamar Turner, which I've been told actually does not sound very Black, which I get, but I do understand because I have students from all walks of life and I tell them it is my job to care enough to learn their names and not make fun of it, not mock it. And so I understand that like when people have different names or different culture, it affects their personal variables. It affects who they are. It affects how they see themselves. And I don't want to play party to that stress. I don't want someone to feel like they have to change who they are to be who I am, so I can be who I am. All right, jump off the model. Let's get to the end, all right? So here's some things I want you to think about. You got to write this down. Write the questions down. This is your not your homework. This is your worksheet, right? So you can kind of keep this and you can build on this. I know how we're doing with time. I got 48 minutes up, so we got, what time we ending?
7.
Okay, all right, perfect. We got good time. So I want you to think about this. What I want you to do on your sheet of paper is write down the question, what areas do you experience stress mentally and psychologically? What does this look like? When you experience stress mentally, where does it happen? Psychologically, where does it happen? Do you feel it in your head? Do you feel it in your body? What does this look like? I want you to write that down, all right? I'll write the question down, start to fill it in, and do that, because I'm going to actually do some things in a second. When you experience stress, I want you to think about, where do you feel it physically? Do you feel it in your neck? Do you feel it in your back? Do you feel it in your shoulders? All right? Yes, you can answer in the chat, Dustin. All right? So we got, when you experience stress mentally and psychologically, and think about it, mentally, psychologically is, you got some homework coming, you don't know the answers, or you're taking a test, or you're trying to answer some questions, you're trying to get it done, or you're trying to figure out how to deal with something new at work, right? Headaches are definitely a sign of stress, all right? Once again, what happens physically, all right? And physically, once again, we're talking about those ailments, right? Headaches, back pain, stomach aches, right? You get the bubbly stomach, right? Matter of fact, I'm gonna just be honest with you. Probably about 15 minutes before we started, I got really anxious and nervous. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I did. I haven't had to do this in a while, so I just like, I had to get in the mirror and I had to buck myself up. I turned the music on loud. I had to, no, Brian, you can do this, because it's a little stressful. That's a good stress, because I want to be helpful. So I had to realize, I'm not going to say anything bad or wrong, because this is what I do, but I realized I want to do a good job, right? So physically, I felt it. I was like, nah. So I had to get hyped. Took me back to my football days, right? Then last, where do you experience stress emotionally? Now, emotional, and a lot of people like to lump psychological and mental into emotional, but they're different. Emotional talks about those feelings. And when I talk to men, and this is weird, when I've talked to men over the work I've done, men tend to see things in terms of emotions in very, very limited and narrow ways. Either it's about sexual intimacy or physical fighting. But really, we have this broad expanse of emotions that we should tap into. And what I found is that when people are stressed, whether they're male or female, they start to see things in a narrow way. Either I'm going to be very emotional, we got to fight, or it's very aggressive and like sexual, right? And so what I want you to think about is emotion, like use all of the words around emotions, like use words like disappointed, upset, hurt, elated, ecstatic, right? Because sometimes when I'm stressed and I get I got a contract out and I got it. So like I was stressed, but I got oh yeah, frustrated. That's a great one, right? But when I found out I got the contract and I'm gonna be able to do this work, I was happy, like I was ecstatic behind it, right? I want you to think about those three areas as we move forward. I want you to think about those three things, because I want you to then tie them to some of the things. So I just was doing a little brainstorming about where might we experience stress. And what I want you to do under each one of them, I want you to put the things under those areas that lead that kind of stress. So when you think mentally, psychologically, physically, and emotional, I want you to tap into what are the things that cause you that type of stress. Maybe when it's task or work demands. Being a professor at Xavier is a very rewarding job, but when I feel stress at work, that tends to be more of my emotional stress. I don't know why, but it's emotional, because I usually, as Destin said, I get frustrated because I want things to happen. I think they should happen, and when they just don't, it frustrates me, right? Maybe it's workload, employee evaluation. When I think about my physical environment, right? So if I'm working on something in my house or in my yard and it doesn't go well, I feel that in my back. So when I cut the grass or I'm pruning the yard or something, or I'm doing something like that, or if I gotta fix my gutters, right? That's a physical stress. I think about perceived control. What things do I actually have control over, right? What do I get? That to me is more psychological and mental, because then I get upset because I'm not in control. And while I don't have to be in control of everything, there are things that I want to control that when I can't, I get psychological. I try to, I start playing chess in my mind. Like, how do I maneuver and how do I get ahead and how do I take over, right? I kind of feel my pinky in the brain moment. I don't know about y'all if y'all remember that cartoon, but every night, what are we going to do? We're going to take over the world. That's why I start to feel that, right? Think about interpersonal relationships, recognition or advancement. Like what happens, as I said earlier, if you're not getting the recognition or you're not getting promoted like you want, job loss or security. What about your responsibility and obligations? I think about things like life and death. Like What's a life and death situation? Not meaning someone losing life, but just saying, if I have obligations in my life, I think about it. Well, if I don't do that, somebody gonna die. Well, if ain't nobody gonna die, that's not a serious issue, and especially if I'm not gonna die, right? As long as I'm gonna be alive, I definitely don't have to rush. But I need to consider that, right? Um, Here's my discussion question. So we got a little bit of time. So I want to give y'all a couple of things to think about. So I'm gonna leave these up. Let me make sure, because I done had fun with y'all. I kind of lost myself. Oh yeah. All right. So I'm gonna say that. Let's do this. Here's your discussion questions, right? What is the difference in your life between stress and burnout, breaking down, losing? I want you to think about that, right? What, in essence, what's the difference between when you know you need help from somebody like Dr. Turner, or when you can handle it yourself, or when you go to a friend, or if you can just say, I just need to take a nap, and when I get up, it'll be better. Hey, look, remember this, naps make everything real good. I discovered that again after grad school, but a good nap helps. Think about this. How have you, and I asked this a little bit earlier, how have you and others like you historically dealt with stress, burnout, etc.? Now, I say you and others like you because remember I said a lot of us learn how to deal with stress, how to deal with stuff like this. We learn our coping styles from who? Our parents, our siblings, people that we admire. We got to think about that. What can cause you to change your coping process? That's an action item. I want you to start to think. If I've been doing something that ain't working too well, what do I need to see happen? Am I going to keep doing this the same way? I've actually decided that I don't like the fact that people like to use, the definition of insanity is doing something over and over and expecting the same result. I don't like that anymore. I'm just going to reject that because I think that's a bad image to give to people. I think some people, if you don't know better, you just don't do better. But I'm asking you all to do better because now you know better. So I want you to think, what can you change about your coping process? And then lastly, I'm going to ask you all, where do you seek support when you can't cope or when you need to cope and it ain't been working? Do you have somebody like Dr. Turner? Do you have mental health resources? Do you have a mentor? Do you have friends? Do you have a church group? Do you have a community agency organization that you can go to? I talk about it to my parents and all that. Yeah, that's perfect. And then the only thing I would say, Dustin, is sometimes we have to acknowledge that the people we've gone to historically may not always be the person we need in that moment. So you don't always want to go to them, and you don't want to put them in bad situations. So once again, that's a resource allocation thing, right? If they don't know or can't know, and I love my mom to death. I think she's at Bible study right now, so I'm gonna tell you something. If she on here, she'll get with me later. But I had to learn when I was growing up. My mama didn't know everything. She wasn't completely perfect. She was still perfect, but not completely. I'm gonna wink on that. All right. So let's talk about some things you can do. Ways to fight the blues. So I think, in a sense, obviously coping is one way to deal with when this stuff happens, right? You cope with it. You accept that it's a fight. You accept that you're in it to win it. So you cope. You take a few punches. You roll with it. You figure out how you win, and you come back. I think about self-esteem. I saw a meme and I love this meme. I should have put this in here, but it basically, the meme says, I have a 100% rate of bouncing back or something to that effect. Like in my life, I have 100% of bouncing back, from bad things happening. And I thought about it and I was like, wait a minute, that's literally every day. Every day you get up, you got another chance to fight. So that's a huge self-esteem boost. That's a huge confidence boost. Ain't nothing stopped you so far. You still here. Keep kicking. Let's rock. Let's roll. Let's get it. I think about hope. For me, my greatest hope right now, Dr. Hawkins kind of alluded to it, but my daughter, like this morning, she got up and brushed my teeth for me. I don't know why, but she decided, Daddy, I'm gonna brush your teeth. And I was like, I don't know how this is gonna work because I see how you brush your teeth. But like the love she showed me, right? The care was just so inviting. And that just gives me hope when I see stuff like that. When I see little kids and their parents, I see older folks and their parents that take care of them. And when I see us take care of each other in this world, that's why I say, how do we deal with this in a pandemic and social run? We gotta take care of each other. Do you know how good it feels when a stranger reaches out to help you and says, hey, I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna take care of you? Definitely spirituality, faith, religion, personal belief. I put all that together because I don't know what y'all believe. I know what I believe. So I'm gonna let y'all pick which one that is. Then I think about inspiration. I find inspiration every day. It's the student who comes to class and I see that boom, light bulb go off, top their head. I think about the inspiration when I see, young kids figuring out stuff. I think about inspiration when I watch a good movie. I want y'all to think about what other positive ways do y'all see to address stress? What things do you see in your community that reminds you that there's a tomorrow? Okay, yeah, we're to the end. So I'm gonna give y'all this parable, this phrase, and this is what I want you all to think about as we go through life. A man was fishing in the river when he noticed someone was floating by and drowning. He jumped in and pulled them out and resuscitated them. Some of y'all may have heard this because this has been going around a while, but I love this, especially when I talk about how we cope with stuff. Shortly afterwards, he noticed another person where he jumped in and saved them too. He noticed another and another. Soon he was exhausted, and he realized he would not be able to save all these drowning people. He was getting tired. He was a pretty smart guy. He might have been like Dr. Turner. He decided to go upstream to find out why all these people were falling in the river. Upon arriving upstream, he realized the bridge was out, it was broken. People didn't see the bridge was broken, so as they were trying to cross the bridge, they were falling in, and they were nearly drowning if he had not been there to save them. Solutions. That's what this is about. He decided he would fix the bridge to stop people from falling in instead of fishing them out after they're already drowning. So my question for you all today, are you a bridge fixer or are you the person falling in? In our lives, you have an opportunity to decide that you're not going to keep exhausting yourself with overwhelming situations that stress you out and keep you from enjoying your fishing trip, your life. Or are you the bridge fixer? You're going to go up, take care of that bridge. But if you're the person falling in, that means you may not be paying attention to all the things going on. You may not be paying attention to the fact that the bridge is out. And when you fall in, all too often, we find ourselves waiting for somebody else to help us and fish us out. With that being said, I was told 7 o'clock. I usually deal with 50 minutes, so I'm right on anyway in terms of a therapy session. If we have time for a few questions, which is 7, I'm not in the rush, but if y'all want to take questions, I will. This is how you can reach me. This is how you can find me. I thank you all for your time this evening. Thank you, Dr. Hawkins, for inviting me. I appreciate it. I hope I've helped someone. I hope I've shared something with somebody. If I can help you, I will. Let me know. Thank you all.
So we do have some time. I'm still at work, so no rush either. But there is a question. Can you see it, Dr. Turner? From Drew?
Let me go back up.
It's in the Q&A. If not, I can read it to you.
Oh, hold up. Let me see something. Where's the Q? Okay, there's the Q&A. All right. I had the chat up. All right, let's see. This is one. Oh, there. Right.
And to everyone that joined today while he's reading this question, which tickled me, if you have to leave, that's great. But if you can stay and ask some questions, that would really be great, because this session is supposed to be to help you guys. So feel free to either ask more questions in the Q&A section or to ask them in the chat. Right. Go ahead, Dr. Turner, because that question from Drew made me laugh. And to all my students that I've stressed out this semester, I'm so sorry.
All right. So this is what I would say, Drew, to your question. And actually, so can everybody else see Drew's question? Everybody knew?
Okay, I think so.
Let me make sure. So what I would say is that Drew's question was, what do you do? Okay, yes, everybody can see it. So let's broaden that question to how do you deal with telling someone they're stressing you out, whether it be a professor, an employer, a friend, romantic partner, parent, whatever. So one of the things I'll go back to is definitely, as I said, you want to think about how do you normally deal with stress? Is this a stressful event or is this stress, right? Is it a stress or a stressful? Now, I try to stay as close to the student mind as possible, and I think a lot about some stressful professors I had, and I realized I only had them for a semester, or I was going to graduate one day. And what I found was this. It may not come out in that moment, but there was ways that we could have conversations that would actually take away some of the hierarchy of the relationship. So one of the things that I could say is this: whenever you want to have a tough conversation with someone, ask permission, right? Actually take away the tension. And you can do this across all walks of life. If you want to engage someone in a tough conversation, let them know, hey, I would like to talk to you about something. It's kind of a tough topic. I'm not quite sure how you may respond, but how would you like me to bring this to you? What's the best way? Some people will be open to that and say, oh, yeah, anytime, let's talk. Other people may put up that wall. What I would say, if they put up that wall, that's probably a cue that they're not going to necessarily go too well with it. So you may want to say, okay, fine, and you may decline it, or you may come up with an alternative issue that can become easier to resolve. But if they're open to it, then come up with a strategy. Another thing would be definitely to talk to people who may be on the same level as that person, i.e. another professor, about what your issue is. See what they say about that. See if they can give you any tips to what's going on. Because the other side of it, now I'll put my professor hat on, sometimes if we're going through stuff as professors, unfortunately, it may show up in the classroom, not as a directive to you, but just in general. And we may not know it. And sometimes, which I think some of my students are here tonight, I've always said, if something's going on, let me know, put it out there. I'm gonna listen. I just want things to be too good that if I have to see it, tell me about it. Let me know. And so that's what I would do. Once again, I would one, ask for permission, ask for the space, because if you ask for the space and they let you in, then they got to be able to handle what you're bringing. Two, talk to people around them to see if they can give you some insight on how to address this person, interact with this person, or if they can give you insight on what's going on. And then lastly, be sensitive. We're all human. Even though sometimes we think people are in hierarchies, people are still human and they're going through stuff. So you may even want to be sensitive, like say, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I just want you to know these things have been happening. It makes me feel this way and I really want to do well. And I don't know how to come to you and I'm just asking you for help. That way, if they choose not to help you, then they're just being a jerk. And you know to stay away from that person. But they may say, what I would say, hopefully, is, man, I'm sorry you feel that way. But look, and actually in my upper level classes, what I tell students, because they have said that to me, I say, well, look, I'm sorry. As a clinical psychologist, this class is really important to me that you get what you're supposed to get out of this class. So I can't make it easier for you. But what I will do is this. When you have questions, come to me, email me, call me. If you have an issue before we take the test or before you turn the assignment, come to me and talk to me about it, and I'll let you know what I'm thinking, the path you're on. Long answer. I hope that helps, Drew. All right. So I picked up some more questions. Let's see. So Talia says, I'm so happy I turned in. I really been feeling well with teaching my child. Oh, she has a comment. Is there a question, Talia? Let me know if there's a question with that. All right. So Destin, I'm gonna take Destin and I'm gonna let Talia let me know if that's just a comment or not, because I think there's a lot that I could say to that in general. So Destin, what I think about is you first have to think about why are you using the stress that you're using and the way you're using it, right? So if you know that you haven't been doing things, thank you, Talia, I got you. I'm gonna say something to that in that effect, all right? If you want to do things differently, then that's why you may have to enlist some people that support you and encourage you to give you an outside view, right? So I love my mama to death. My mama has been my rock since I was born. That's my go-to, my ride or die, my ace boon coon, everything, right? So I go to her first, unfortunately, and my brothers and I are really close, but I go to her first. I said, Mom, you've known me all my life, plus 9 months, right? Tell me what you think I'm doing. Tell me what you see. And what I found is that in that moment, she's able to give me insight that starts me on my journey, right, to figuring out what's going on. So I would first say, find a couple people, 2, maybe 3, that you really trust, that you can go to say, hey, this is how I'm dealing with this. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm experiencing. Can you help me out? Once they give you that, then you start to think about how do you break that habit, right? So if you want to talk more about it, we can, Destin. But what I would say, I'll take an example. I think about, for me, I was a master procrastinator, actually, right? It wasn't until I figured out that my procrastination was not necessarily stopping me from being successful. It was creating stress in my life. So I started to ask people, say, why is it that you look like you always know where you're going or what you're doing? They say I use a calendar. Well, I tried it. Well, my calendaring about 15 years ago was awful. It was awful. Like, I didn't do it right. I just put it on a calendar and I forgot about it. You think I was checking that calendar? I expected that calendar to get up in the morning and be like, hey, Brian, this is what you need to do today. And I was like, oh, that don't work. But then I realized I'm kind of a techie person, right? So I started using Google Calendar. Actually, back then I was using Outlook Calendar. And I found that Outlook calendar had reminders. And with the Outlook calendar, I could actually send a reminder to myself an hour before I was supposed to be somewhere that I need to be somewhere. Or I can send it a day or 2 days or a week or a month. Just like tonight, I got this reminder this morning. Hey, remember, don't do anything this evening. You got to be on at 6 o'clock. So that was my example, is that I thought, I said, okay, well, I got to get out of this thing where I procrastinate. I went back to using a calendar. I figured out the best way to use a calendar for me was electronic. And now what I do every morning at 6 o'clock, I get an email from Google telling me my agenda for the day. I have color coded my calendar so that it's easy for me to figure out whether it's a clinical issue, whether it's an academic issue, Xavier, whether it's a personal issue, if it's Dr. Hawkins' birthday and I need to call and say, hey, happy birthday, Doc, all that's on my calendar. So I removed, and remember a word that we put on, I had an aside, cognitive, right? So I removed that cognitive overload. I don't have that pressure. So now what happens is I just know when it comes to an appointment or a meeting, I put on my calendar, set the reminder, and I'm good. And so that's something I did differently. But sometimes you have to sit down and come up with a strategy, as I said in the presentation. Sometimes you just have to work through, different options until you find one that works best. Let me jump back to Leah. I hope is it Talia or Talia? I'm sorry. I should have asked that question. I'm saying it the way I think, but it could be Talia or Talia. I've seen it both ways. All right. So what I would say to that is this. When I read that, I thought about being a single mother, teaching my child, having class, working, paying the bills. So one of the things I would definitely say is to look at and think about your support network. What I think about most in those moments is that oftentimes we become creatures to our own self, right? What we're doing. We don't reach out, we don't look for help because we feel like this is my struggle. I got this. I'm gonna shoulder this load. The first thing I would say for anybody that's a parent, especially a single mother, there are people who will help you. They may not be your family. They may be friends, maybe a professor. But don't be afraid to reach out and say, hey, is there any way you can help me? Now, there's a whole nother level of making sure that people that help you are trustworthy, but that's something I gotta say you gotta deal with on your own. You gotta build that relationship, make sure they're trustworthy, but you can do that, right? But the big thing is don't feel like you have to shoulder the load by yourself, because there are people who, thank you, Talia. I said it correctly first, yay for me. But there are people that will help you. The other thing in regards to school, working, paying bills, that's where sometimes you got to think about some of these commitments. When you talk to people, you got to seek out other people who may have done it. Maybe there's other people who may have done what you're trying to do. I definitely think about mentorship. So I don't know if you have a mentor, if you have other people you can lean to, can help guide you. Definitely seek out folks that you can get mentors, right? I have mentors for all different things. I have my professional mentors, I have my personal mentors, I have my life mentors, I have my how do I figure out what to do next to my life mentors, because I need to be able to tap into them for different things. And then lastly, what I would say is remember that you're committed to this life for the long haul. And one of the things about, as I said, stress versus stressors, you may have to plan, I know that this will be stressful. You're in school, it's going to be stressful. I can't lie about that. For the 4 and 7, 11 years I was in school, undergrad and grad school, and then the 12 undergrad, I ain't never have a day where it wasn't stressful. Oh, wait, graduation. Those are the 3 days in my life where it wasn't stressful, right, related to school. So I would definitely say, think about that. This is a long-term thing. It's a marathon. It's not a journey. It's not a sprint. So don't think about some of the stresses being things that you have to figure out today. It's going to go away when you graduate. And when you graduate, that's going to be a joyous day. All right. I have someone who says they're anonymous attendee during the pandemic. I find a lot of my stress coming back. Lack of ability to get away from the same environment. During typical, I often go away from the desk to clear mind. But when there's anxiety around the disease and consequence stuff. So anonymous attendee, I am with you 100%. As I said, I am an extrovert. I'm I'm with you. I don't even know what to say right now, because that is me. That is exactly how I've been dealing with it. But what I will say is this. I got a bike. Like I said, I built some stuff in the backyard for my daughter. And by the end of this year, we're going to have 9 kids in my family that are all under the age of 4. So the backyard is going to be where I can sit back, listen to music, watch them play. So what I would say is this, because if I hear you correctly, the ideal is that you may be a little extroverted or more outdoorsy or just a person who wants to be active. You got to figure out ways to get that same release, but in a safe way. So I ride my bike. I live next to the levee here in New Orleans, so I can ride my bike on the levee. I walk my dog. When I'm with my daughter, she gets in her little Power Wheels car on her bike, and we take walks and we do things. I was just joking with another friend about the pandemic. Oh, actually, my students this morning, we were talking about their anxiety with the pandemic. And I was like, well, hey, it's okay if you get 2 or 3 friends together, or if there is an event, here's what I do. I ask the question, are you going to ask everybody if they've been tested for COVID? Are you going to check temperatures? What's going to be your policy or procedure to make sure everybody's safe? And if they can't give me that, then I don't go. Think about what you need to feel safe in some environments. Once again, there are some places where it's very easy that you can go, things that you can do, that you can get out and enjoy yourself. So don't feel so limited that you can't do anything. Think about what you would need to do to be safe, who you feel safest around. So during this pandemic, my brothers, I have 3 living brothers, and I have a host of other brothers and friends and family. So from time to time, we do a social distance barbecue in the backyard. Now, we all know everybody's been tested. We all know everybody's taking temperature. So we're not too out the box, but we say stuff like, hey, you know, if you've been feeling sick, or if you think you've been around people, don't come. We don't take it the wrong way. And then people don't take it the wrong way when we tell them that. Because as I tell my family, if you give me COVID, last thing you have to worry about is not getting a Christmas gift. All right? All right. I hope that helps. Let me know if there's more to that, and I'll share. Michelle says, is there any other solution you use besides scheduling your day to deal with stress for school? Yes, Michelle. One of the biggest things that I remember about school was oftentimes rewarding myself for doing well and rewarding myself for just pushing through. So, and actually, Michelle, to your point, I didn't actually have a schedule during school. I literally just went along with it, right? I just didn't care. I just was just whatever. I just went, right? And that's why I said I learned that scheduling helps. But what I think about most is this. I keep in the front of my mind, not the back of my mind, while I'm in school. And in doing so, that allows me to feel committed to studying, to taking on responsibilities and doing the things that I have to do to be successful. So without just scheduling, I put in my mind, I put on paper, and I did do this. And actually what was weird, in my res hall growing and at Southern, we didn't have 2As and things like that. So I used to do Post-its, and we put the Post-its on the mirror. And those Post-its, I'm sorry, those Post-its would remind me of what I needed to be doing. I very much engaged in social activities. Once again, we're in the midst of a pandemic, so how do you do that? You do it in a safe and healthy way. I had outlets. I played football as an undergrad, so football was a big outlet because me being in class and being academic was completely opposite from me being on a football field. So, Michelle, what I think about also is you have to define what's the whole you. And I think that's another beauty about being an undergrad or a student, as well, actually just anybody. You should always be exploring the different parts of who you are. So maybe you want to figure out a new skill. I think, Michelle, earlier today in class, you talked about drawing. Maybe that's something you want to do. Maybe you find something in the community or something online. I don't do video games as much, but that was what I discovered in grad school. I started playing video games, not because I became a video game connoisseur, but because sometimes I just needed that hour to do something that was mindless, that didn't require me doing a whole bunch of engagement. Music, think about different things. So like I took up racquetball when I was at Jackson State. That became a big thing. Working out was a big thing. I started to read again, right? I know for students, reading is this scary thing that you have to do. But what I found was when I would read things I really enjoyed, it made reading for school easier because I had started to hone my skills again on reading. So I got a whole list, Michelle. We can talk about this more. So I'm gonna stop right now, and I'm gonna let anybody else got questions or any other things going on. So yeah. Dr. Hawkins, what you got?
So I don't have any questions. I think you've answered quite a few. And I don't see any in the chat. And we answered all in the Q&A. So we can end it. And if you need to get in contact with me, please do so, or get in contact with Dr. Turner. And I hope you have a healthy and safe week. And thank you for attending. Thanks, Dr.
Thank you for
Turner.
having me. Thank you for everybody. Y'all stay sucker free and COVID free too. All right.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.